Which description of the atom based on the results of the gold foil experiment in the early 1900s? The answer is 3, because in the gold foil experiment, the nucleus was bombarded by a positive charge, which repelled the nucleus. According to the electron cloud model, which term is defined as the most probable location of an electron in an atom? The answer is 3. The orbital is the most probable place to find an electron. 1 and 4 don't make sense. And remember, the nucleus contains protons and neutrons, no electrons. Which change occurs when an electron returns from a higher energy state to a lower energy state? The answer is 4, because in order to go from a higher energy level to a lower energy level, the electron has to release energy. An electron absorbs energy when it moves from a lower energy level to a higher energy level. 1 and 2 do not apply to this concept. Which phrase describes the different isotopes of an element? The answer is 3, and this is just about remembering the definition of an isotope, that it's the same number of protons and a different number of neutrons. Which statement describes the chemical property of sodium? We can eliminate 1 because color is a physical property. We can also eliminate 2 since it's talking about density, which is also a physical property. 3 can be eliminated because the atomic radius is also a physical property. This makes the answer 4 because it must react with water, or reaction, which is the key word that makes us know that this is a chemical property. Oxygen can exist as diatomic oxygen gas, or ozone. These two forms of oxygen have O2 and O3 have different molecular structures because when you draw it, O2 has 2 bonds in between them, and then another 4 electrons around each O. O3 has 2 bonds in between the outer 2 and then the middle, and then the outer 2 have 4 electrons around them. This shows their different molecular structure. Because of the different molecular structure, they also have different properties. Which formula contains a polyatomic ion? Polyatomic ions can be found on table E. If we go to table E, cyanide, CN, is right there. What information about C4H10 can be determined from its structural formula, but not determined by its molecular formula? The answer is 4. The arrangement can be determined from its structural formula because the structural formula is when it's drawn out. So you can see how the electrons are formed around each element and how they're bonded to each other. Quantity is conserved in all chemical reactions. The answer is charge. Charge is always conserved in all chemical reactions because the law of conservation of charge says that the net charge will always be constant. What do the coefficients in a balanced chemical equation indicate about the substances in the equation? Mole ratios. When you read an equation and you have 2Cl, that's 2 moles of chlorine, and that applies to all elements in a chemical equation. At SDP, which substance has metallic bonding? 1 can be eliminated because remember argon is Ar on the periodic table in group 18, making it a noble gas. 2 can also be eliminated because chloride is left at the staircase on the periodic table, making barium chloride a nonmetal. Sulfur dioxide, oxygen, is a nonmetal since it's also left at the staircase. This means that titanium is a metal, so it has metallic bonding. How many pairs of electrons are shared between the nitrogen atoms in a molecule of N2? 3 pairs of electrons are shared. In the outer shell of nitrogen, there are 5 electrons, and 2 nitrogen elements means that we have to distribute 10 electrons in order to make sure each one has 8 electrons. After putting 1 pair between them, there are still 8 electrons to be distributed. So we add another pair. Now that there are 6 leftover electrons left, but this doesn't give each 8 electrons in their outer shell. If we add a third pair, we can distribute the 4 leftover between the 2, and this will mean that each nitrogen now has 8 electrons in their outer shell. Which formula represents a molecule with an asymmetrical distribution of charge? The answer to this is 4H2O, because a dipole is formed due to the positive charge on the hydrogen pole and the negative charge on the oxygen pole, so it's going to bend. Given the equation representing a reaction, what occurs during this reaction? You can use the acronym BARF. When a bond is broken, energy is absorbed. When a bond is formed, energy is released. Using this, we can eliminate 1 and 3. I2 is being broken into I plus I, so this makes the answer 2. The electronegativity difference between the atoms in a molecule of HF can be used to determine the electronegativity difference can be used to determine the polarity of the bond. If the electronegativity is greater than 1.7, it's an ionic bond, and if it's less than 1.7, it's a covalent bond. Which sample of matter is classified as a mixture? The answer here is 4, because it says that it's an aqueous solution, meaning that it is water that contains one or more dissolved substances. At STP, which property of tungsten remains the same for all samples of tungsten? Density will stay the same for all samples because density is an intensive property of matter. Remember, even if you have something and you cut it up, the density of each piece will still be the same as the density of the object when it was whole. An element is composed of atoms that must have. An atom is part of an element. On the periodic table of elements, any element, such as oxygen, must be made up of oxygen atoms that all have the same atomic number. So the answer is 2. Compared to a 2-mole aqueous solution of Ki at 1 atmosphere, water at 1 atmosphere has a Ki is a salt because it's an aqueous solution. Adding salt to water, like when you're boiling pasta, lowers the boiling point. You add the salt to the water so it can boil faster. Likewise, when it snows, the city puts salt on the ground and increases the freezing point of the snow so that it'll melt. This makes the answer 2. Which statement describes the particles of an ideal gas based on the kinetic molecular theory? In an ideal gas, there are no attractive forces, so eliminate A. The particles move randomly. They don't collide, so eliminate 3. They're always in motion. The answer is 2, since they move in a straight line motions colliding with the container. Chemical reactions are most likely to occur when reacting particles collide with the 4 can be eliminated. The number of electron shells definitely doesn't apply. 3 can also be eliminated because it contains mass and the number of electrons, which are irrelevant. Eliminate 2. This does not apply to the question because the clue is that it contains the phrase proper first ionization energy. At STP, a 2-liter sample of nitrogen gas and a 2-liter sample of oxygen gas have equal numbers of molecules. If you go to table S, you can see that the boiling points should be different, the density should be different, and if you look at the table of elements, you can see that the atomic masses are different. Based on Table H, which compound has the weakest intermolecular forces at 75 degrees Celsius? A higher boiling point indicates a greater intermolecular force, since a higher boiling point means greater attraction between the molecules of that liquid. You can see the boiling point when the vapor pressure is equal to 101.3 kPa. Propanone has the lowest boiling point, which is around 55 degrees Celsius on table H. At around 55 degrees Celsius, if you bring your finger up, the vapor pressure of propanone will be 101.3 kPa, so the answer is 3. Which term identifies a force of attraction that exists between molecules of water? The answer is 2. H2O includes hydrogen, hence hydrogen bonding. Which process results in an increase in disorder? The answer is 3. The sublimation of solid iodine. Disorder means an increase in entropy. Energy increases as you go from a solid to a liquid and then a liquid to a gas, with the gas having the greatest entropy. The particles of a gas are more spread out than those in a liquid and solid, hence greater entropy. Sublimation means going directly from a solid to a gas, so this shows the greatest increase in disorder. Systems in nature tend to undergo changes that result in 4. A decrease in energy and an increase in entropy. Think about how you're on a regular basis. When you get home from school, you have less energy and your room might be messy, a prime example of an increase in entropy or disorder. What is the general formula for a homologous series that includes ethane? If you go to table Q, you'll see that in the alkynes, the general formula is CnH2n-2, and ethane is a part of the alkyne series, making its general formula also CnH2n-2, so the answer is 4. Given the equation representing a reaction, when 2 moles of electrons are gained by fluorine, how many moles of electrons are lost by iodine? 2. 2 moles of electrons will be lost by iodine because the reactants and the products have to be balanced. Which compound is an Arrhenius base? If you go to table L, common bases, the only option there is 3. Which statement describes the benefit of fission? 1 is the only benefit because everything else that happens is things that you wouldn't want to happen. The numbers of protons, neutrons, and electrons in each of 4 different ions are shown in the table below. Which ion has the greatest mass? The mass of the ion can be determined by adding the total number of protons and neutrons. E has the greatest mass because 50 plus 70 is equal to 120, and everything else is less than 120. The mass of a sample of nickel is determined to be 20.4 grams. How many significant figures are used to express this mass? When a decimal place is involved, like in this question, the zeros are considered significant figures, so the answer is 4. The only time the 0 will not be considered a significant figure is when it comes before the number if the number is something like 0.5 or if it's something like 550 because there is no decimal point. What is a chemical name for the compound PbO2? For this problem, you have to remember that the metal is forming ions with different charges, so the Roman numeral specifies the charge of the metal. If Pb has a charge of +4, then this gets rid of the 4 electrons in its valence shell, which can be distributed 2 and 2 to the valence shells of the 2 oxygen atoms, completing their outer shell. Which formula is the empirical formula for ethane, C2H6? The empirical formula is a simplified version of the chemical formula, similar to how you simplify a fraction. Here, you can divide 2 and 6 by 2, and when you do that, that gives you CH3, answer choice 2. Given a balanced equation representing a reaction, which mass of O2 reacts completely with 5.6 grams of CO to produce 8.8 grams of CO2? This problem is just a case of doing some simple math. You have to know that the 8.8 is the products of the reaction, so it'll be on the right side of the arrow, and that 5.6 grams of CO plus an unspecified amount of O2 must be equal to 8.8 grams. So when you do 8.8 minus 5.6, the answer is 3.2 grams, answer choice 3. Which numerical setup can be used to calculate the formula mass of C9H11NO2? Just taking a look at this, you can eliminate 1 and 2 because U just represents the atomic mass unit, but obviously each element has its own individual mass that you need to look on the periodic table to see in the top left corner. Looking at the mass in the top left corner, you would see that the mass of carbon is 12U, but you have 9 carbons, so that means the answer choice should be 4 because it has 9 times 12U. Based on Table F, which compound is most soluble in water? For this question, it asks which solution is most soluble in water, so that means that 3 of them will be insoluble. If you look at answer choice 1, calcium bromide, in the halides on table F, you'll see that bromine, it's insoluble when combined with silver, lead, or mercury. Calcium is not included, so calcium bromide is soluble, but we can also just check the other answer choices. Lead sulfate, if you go to sulfates on table F, it says that it's insoluble when combined with lead. Then let's look at silver carbonate. It says that carbonate is insoluble unless it's combined with group 1 ions or ammonium. This means that silver carbonate is insoluble because silver is not in group 1. Lastly, tin hydroxide is also insoluble. In table F, it says that if hydroxide is insoluble unless combined with group 1 ions, calcium ion, strontium ion, barium ion, or ammonium. Based on Table G, which combination of solute and solvent will form a saturated solution when thoroughly mixed at 20 degrees Celsius? The answer is 1. A saturated solution must be on the specific line of the solute. The other answers are either unsaturated, which is below the line, or supersaturated, above the line. A solution has a mass of 2,000 grams and contains 0.05 gram of dissolved solute. What is the concentration in parts per million of this solution? To solve this problem, you have to turn to the back page of the reference table and look at the equation parts per million is equal to mass of solute over the mass of solution times a million. If you do the math, the answer is 25, choice 2. A person with a body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius holds a hot cup of water in their hand. The temperature of the cup is 44 degrees Celsius. The air temperature is 22 degrees Celsius. Which phrase describes the heat transfer that occurs in this system? In this question, the cup has the highest temperature. Heat can only transfer from objects of a higher temperature to objects of a lower temperature, so the answer is 4. The heat will transfer from the cup to the hand. What is the amount of heat absorbed to completely melt 26.2 grams of H2O at 0 degrees Celsius? To solve this question, you have to turn to the back page of the reference table and look at the equation Q equals mHf. The heat of fusion applies when something is freezing or melting, and the heat of vaporization is used when something is vaporizing or condensing. If you plug in 26.2 grams times 334 joules per grams, the answer is 8,750.8. Answer choice 1. The graph below shows a compound being cooled beginning in the liquid phase. Which statement describes the average kinetic energy and the potential energy between minute 2 and 6? The answer choice is 4. As the compound is freezing, the potential energy will decrease. The plateau from 2 to 6 minutes shows a temperature change, so the kinetic energy remains constant. Which formula represents a saturated hydrocarbon? A saturated hydrocarbon only has single bonds, so we can eliminate 2. Then we should eliminate 3 and 4 because they are not drawn correctly. Oxygen and chlorine do not have 8 electrons around them to complete their outer shell. Given an equation representing a reaction, which type of organic reaction is represented by this equation? The answer to this is choice 4, substitution, since a hydrogen atom and a bromine atom are switched or substituted in the chemical reaction. There was previously 2 bromine atoms, but then on the product side, the bromine atom is bonded with the hydrogen atom. In which compound does sulfur have an oxidation state of +4? In order to do this problem, you can use the crisscross rule. So S +4 and O -2, and then after crisscrossing, it's S2O4. But the empirical formula simplifying S2O4 is SO2, so the answer is 3. Which solution is the best conductor of electricity? Since it's all calcium chloride, the concentration will determine which quantity is the best conductor of electricity. The answer is 4 because it has the largest concentration. Given the incomplete equation representing a neutralization reaction, what is the formula of the missing product X? There has to be an equal amount of each element on the reactant side and the product side. On the reactant side, there is 1 mole of strontium, 8 moles of oxygen, 4 moles of hydrogen, and 2 moles of nitrogen. On the product side, there are 4 moles of hydrogen, 2 moles of nitrogen, and 2 moles of oxygen. If you look at all the answer choices, we need to find the one that has the 1 mole of strontium, 6 moles of oxygen, and 2 moles of nitrogen. Answer choice 4 has all the missing amounts. Given the equation representing a reversible reaction, the water molecule acts as an acid because you have to remember that an acid donates a hydrogen ion and a base will accept the hydrogen ion, so that means the answer is 3. Which nuclear equation represents beta decay? If you look at table O, a beta particle has a mass of 0 and a charge of -1. This means we can eliminate answers 2 and 3 because they don't show a beta particle. Beta decay also means that a beta particle has to be released on the product side, but this is not the case for 1, so we can eliminate 1 and the answer is 4. Given the equations A and B, which type of nuclear reaction do these equations represent? Fusion is when lighter nuclei combine to form a heavier nucleus, and fission is when a heavy nucleus is split into smaller nuclei. Looking at equation A, hydrogen with an atomic mass of 2 and a hydrogen nucleus with an atomic mass of 3 are combined to form a helium ion with a mass of 4. This shows fusion. Equation B shows a uranium atom with an atomic mass of 235 split into 2 nuclei, a strontium nucleus with an atomic mass of 90, and a xenon nucleus with an atomic mass of 143. So, equation A is fusion and equation B is fission, choice 4.